Okay, how to succeed after 25 years in this space, how to succeed in this particular business. So the first one, my first thought is front-end decisions, not back-end. Even when you're trying to figure things out, make front-end decisions. And I want to share a story with you that I think, I don't share this story much, but I think there's a lot of merit in this story. So years ago, I'm running an office. My recruiter comes into my office and says, Jamie, there's an FBI agent here. Okay, you've got my attention. Okay, the FBI is in my business. And so I'm like, well, what does he want? He's not saying, he just wants to talk to you. You don't know why he's here. And I'm going through my mind. I'm like, hey, what did I do? Did I hide the body? Did I not hide the body? Like, what's going on here, right? So I meet this Tom Cruise looking dude in the lobby. I shake his hand. He says, well, can we talk in private somewhere? I'm like, yeah, sure, we can talk in private. So get into my office. He sits down and he wants to know about a certain ex-rep. And I'm like, that name doesn't ring a bell. He says, well, he worked for you. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think so. So I go into my computer and I'm like, well, sure enough, this rep was working in my office for one day. He says, well, what can you tell me about this rep? I'm like, I can't remember him. Like, I hire a lot of people, and I apologize. Maybe it's shallow for me. I can't even picture this guy's face. I don't know. And he says, well, when you hire people, do you hire with the expectation of, was it like a long-term thing? Was it just a one-day thing? I'm like, no, it's a career path. I'm hiring with the intent for people to stick around a long time. Well, did he give you any notice that he was leaving? I'm like, I don't think so. I'm assuming he just had a rough day in the field and just decided at the end of the day it probably wasn't for him. He says, well, that's pretty poor character, don't you think? I'm like, I guess. I don't know. I don't know where this is going. It's an FBI agent here. He says, well, that's all the questions I have. And I'm like, well, I've got a couple questions for you. I'm like, is he in any trouble? Like, what's the drama? Is he selling missiles or something I should know about? Because no, he's applying for a position with the FBI. And I'm like, so you're obviously doing a character reference. You don't just call like to check up on character references. No, this is how we do our character references with the FBI. We just show up unannounced and we want to talk to people. And we looked into his file and we saw that he worked with you for a day. So we wanted to know what happened. So I don't know how that story unfolded for this ex-rep. I just have to believe that couldn't have been favorable for him. Right? Like, did he get the job? Did he not get the job? I don't know. But he made a decision probably on the back end. It wasn't a front end decision. Otherwise, he would have told me, hey, Jamie, can I try this out for one day and then leave at the end of the day? No, I don't want to waste anybody's time here, especially yours. Just don't make front end decisions. The way I look at it is identify milestones on this journey. Identify these short-term goals and then run with every bit of effort you have to achieve these milestones. For me, it was like, okay, I got to get into leadership. There's no quitting on the road to leadership. I at least got to hit that. It's nothing long-term. I'm not committing to 20 years of my life. I'm committing to get good at salesmanship. That's going to serve me my whole life. So set these short-term goals, run with everything you have to hit it, and then evaluate and set more goals. Just make a decision on the front end and manage that decision on the back. Don't leave decision making up to your emotional state. So that's bullet point number 1, front end decisions. My second point is self-improvement. As a child, I remember as a child, all my absentees or lates at school, somebody always held me accountable. Okay, if I'm late or I'm absent, I always had to bring in a note. Chances are you had to do the same. I remember in 12th grade, our whole class decided to play hooky together. Like the whole class, like we ain't going to school. We picked the day on the calendar. None of us showed up. I don't know if any of you ever tried that. The teachers were not happy the next day when we showed up for school. And, they all wanted a note. Just like when we were in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, you miss a day, we need a note. I'm like, hey, Mom, they're giving me a rough time. I need to have a note. She goes, well, what were you doing? I'm like, well, I was golfing. She sees I'm getting good grades. She sees that I work hard. My mom writes me a note. Jamie was golfing yesterday. Please excuse him. I turn it into the teacher the next day, and they weren't very happy with my mom. But there was always somebody holding me accountable. There was always somebody as a child who kind of owned my development. And I'm not sure if you've connected these dots yet, but as you become an adult, a lot of people just don't care. I remember going to university and it's like, yeah, nobody's doing roll call at the University of Saskatchewan. And I had a friend of mine who was, laughing and giggling about how much hooky he was playing. And I'm like, based on the cost, because, we got to pay for this now, I don't know if it's that funny anymore. It was funny in high school, going golfing when I should have been in class, but I don't think I want to do that when I'm coughing up so much dough for university. But it was kind of a wake-up call, like, hey, welcome to adulthood. You're responsible for yourself. Nobody is responsible for you anymore. So I've got just 2 subpoints under owning your self-improvement. Like, you have to own it. And so these subpoints come in the form of questions. And my first question is, when do you get your best thoughts? It's a question for you. When are your best thoughts formed? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Like, when do you think the best throughout the day? Go ahead.
Shower.
In the shower. I too, when I thought of this, I'm like, well, yeah, I get my best thoughts in the shower. You want to know why? Because my device doesn't follow me into the shower. These little devices, think about it. You can't stand in line at Starbucks for 2 minutes without whipping out your phone like, oh, gee, what am I going to do with this dead air time I have here? I better look at a device. God forbid I talk to somebody in line. I have to look at my device. So we're constantly being fed, and we're not carving out enough time to reflect and think. So if you're going to own your self-improvement, you have to carve out time. Maybe daily, maybe that's too much. You're like, oh, I'm not used to it. At least weekly. Carve out some time to think. But that whole shower thing, I'm not surprised you said shower. I think a lot of us would say shower. But whenever that time to think is when you're not in front of your device. So put the device down, get some time to think. My second subpoint with a question is, who have you decided will shape your views? Like, well, what do you mean? Who have you decided to shape your views? Well, your views are being shaped. You have to give somebody or something permission. You're the one choosing the podcast. You're choosing the music you listen to. You're choosing the TV that you watch. And this became loud and clear to me as a married man. We're about to have our first baby, and my son Dane is inside Joanne's belly, and we're going on a date. We're going to a movie, and so we go to the movie theaters in Culver City, and it's like, okay, so what do we want to watch? There's like 20 different theaters. There's a plethora of options. And I'm looking at all the shoot-'em-up thriller, like car chase, like, that's my kind of movie. I'm like, Joanne's probably going to want some kind of romantic comedy, and we'll figure out something in the middle. And she says to me, I'm like, well, what do you want to watch? She says, I want to watch Chicken Little. I'm like, what? You want to watch the cartoon? You want to watch that G? That was out of 20 options, that would have been number 21 for me. Like, there's no way I want to watch Chicken Little. And I'm like, why do you want to watch Chicken Little? She says, well, let me guess, you want to watch all the shoot 'em up? I'm like, well, yeah. I was hoping we could talk about some of these good movies that I want to watch. And she says, I don't want any negative emotions. I don't want any adrenaline. I don't want to pass any of that along to our unborn son. And I was just kind of stunned listening to her. And I'm like, like, she's so thoughtful and intentional about what she's passing on to her kids. We home birthed all 3 of our kids because she didn't want to have any drugs in her system to pass on to our child. I mean, she takes it to the extreme, this woman, right? But it really made me wonder, like, am I sensitive enough to, what I'm putting into my mind? I read a document, and I don't recommend you guys necessarily reading this, but what do you do in the case of a live shooter? I'm like, oh, gee, this stuff happens in the U.S. I'm sure you guys read about it. It's so dangerous, in the United States, right? And so what do you do in the event? And so this was by some guy who, is in law enforcement. I'm not sure what his role was. But he gave this list of things to do in the event that you're in a situation where there's a live shooter. And the first thing he says is duck. Because so many people in these situations are sitting there. Let's just say somebody walked in, knock on wood, let's say, and everybody's just sort of watching because you're so used to watching. You're so desensitized by the violence and things you see on TV, you think that this is normal. It hasn't quite struck your mind yet that you should run for cover. And so it says a lot of people, unfortunately, get injured or killed in these situations because they actually stand there and they watch. Isn't that kind of like a wake-up call for all of us? Like, have you become desensitized to some of the stuff that you're allowing to influence you? So just be thoughtful in who you're allowing to influence you. I made a decision years ago when I first found Minute with Maxwell by John Maxwell. It's just a 2-minute blurb every day for 5 days a week for the last 15 years of my life. I allowed John Maxwell to shape me. I want you to shape me. I want Gary Paulson to shape me. I want to listen to good podcasts from Patrick Bet-David to shape me. But you have to make that front-end decision back to subpoint number 1. But who have you allowed to shape you? Okay, so look to self-improvement. Own your self-improvement is really my second point. So my third, I'm going to go back to some high school days. I'm not going to tell you about playing hooky golfing. That's kind of a low-integrity thing, Jamie, right? You can call me out on that if you'd like. But my third point is copycat. So in school, and I can picture this in school, there was this girl, Andrea, who was super smart. This girl was, I mean, we all knew she was going to do something with her life. And sure enough, she's a lawyer in Ottawa, working for the government. And so I always wanted Andrea somewhere in front of me, okay? Either to the front or front right, front left. But if there's a multiple choice test going on, I would love to kind of lean a little bit to see, did you circle A or C? Because I'm sort of stuck on this. Now, is that encouraged in school or is that frowned upon in school to cheat on Andrea? Yeah, like, hey, don't do it. You're cheating. But in life, listen, it is highly encouraged in life to be a copycat. Right? It's highly encouraged. I mean, it reduces the time and pain it takes to succeed by copying people. I love I'm a big Kobe Bryant fan, big Michael Jordan fan, and Michael Jordan said that it's like, Michael, who could beat you at one-on-one? And he's always like, the one guy that scares me the most is Kobe Bryant, if we were like the same age and we could play, because Kobe has been studying me for years and he has completely copied my game. So he's the one guy, it's like Michael versus Michael is what it would feel like. Everybody else, I'd beat him hands down. But Kobe was always the guy that scared him. But Kobe was a copycat of Michael Jordan. Identify the studs and copy them. In an office level, find the stud. It's not that hard to figure out. It's like, well, you got a couple guys here pacing for $120,000 a year. I know exactly who I'd be taking out for dinner. Hey, what can I bring you for breakfast tomorrow? Hey, can I have a one-on-one? Like, copy these people. However they're doing things, whatever they eat, copy what they're doing. All right, and so my fourth and final point is patience. And nobody wants to hear this. Nobody wants to hear patience. Really, I need to be patient? I always tell my kids, I'm like, hey, patience is the one thing you might not want to pray for, because God will give it to you every time. Every time. So Gary Vaynerchuk, do you guys know Gary Vaynerchuk? Gary V, you'll know him on social media. So he thinks that the biggest roadblock for millennials and Gen Zs is their lack of patience. Our microwave culture of instant success is clouding perspective regarding success. So he says patience is the shortcut to success. I thought that's interesting. And that every successful person has said that overnight lasts years. Patience is an active choice that requires strength, resilience, and a deep belief in fulfilling one's vision. I just remember years ago watching an interview with Hootie and the Blowfish. I'm sure none of you know who maybe you do. It's an old band, if you listen to probably the 90s is when he was around. And I remember this reporter, innocent reporter, probably didn't think about it too much, but hey, Hootie, how are you handling your overnight success? And he had this disgusting look on his face, like overnight success. He goes, we've been traveling for 9 years from bar to bar, living out of a van down by the river. I didn't quite say the river part, but this is how we're handling overnight success, just 9 years of the grind. I mean, that is the story. I think we've all been kind of given misled a little bit when you hear the Mark Zuckerberg stories of how this guy became a billionaire at 21. That is not the norm. That is a major outlier. The norm is grind, 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 grind. live modestly, and then it happens with time. So you've got to be patient. And so my advice to you is cut yourself some slack. This is good advice to all of you. This is what I tell you guys all the time. I mean, cut yourself some slack. Take the pressure off. Don't be in such a rush to get to the destiny. Pursue the journey more than the destiny. Because once you get there, once you arrive, you'll realize that the arrival, like being there, is like, it's cool and all, but it's like what you learned along the way that has the most value that you can pass along to other people. So